how did you start? Did you always want to be in the movie business? You grew up in Boston, or you were born in Boston?
I was born in Boston. I grew up in New Jersey. I loved the movies. I go to the movies every Friday night. I would be a nerd and keep a list of every movie I saw and what the sound system was in the theater that would save some ticket stubs from these outings.
You keep your tickets like I do.
A lot of them, yeah, a lot of them.
I love that.
And I still have all the tickets from when I saw The Phantom Menace 13 times in the theater.
Wow.
There were psychological issues at the time. And I wanted to go to film school. I wanted to go to USC, and it was the only school I applied to, and I was very lucky, and I got in my freshman year. So when I was 18 years old, I moved out to LA, and didn't end up getting into the film school for a few years after that.
How many times were you rejected?
4 or 5 times. So I applied every semester, rejection, next semester, rejection, next semester. And the very last opportunity, when I started thinking, well, what else would I do? I got in.
Why do you think you finally got in?
I don't know. They needed a warm body, I guess. I'm not sure. They had a quota to fill.
Yeah.
And while I was there, I saw that the smart kids were getting internships. And they were interning for companies I hadn't necessarily heard of or places. And I didn't want to do that. I was all for giving my all and not making any money and paying for my own super shuttle because I didn't have a car. So my internship was costing me like $40 a day to take a super shuttle there a couple times. This was before Uber, everybody. And the cabs just wouldn't show up. And I saw a listing for an internship for Donner Schuler Donner Productions. And I knew what they had done, and Dick Donner had done Goonies and Lethal Weapon, and of course Superman, which is one of the formative movies for me as a kid. And I started there as an intern.
And Superman, of course, came out of a comic book, DC comic books. So that leads to the question, were you always a comic book nerd, or was it the movie that attracted you?
Movies.
Was always the movie?
Always the movies. I read some comics. I collected some comics briefly. And I knew all these characters. I watched the cartoons. I had the pajamas. I had some of the toys. But it was really movies. And I sort of didn't quite understand why there weren't more movies based on those characters, because the movies I loved in the 80s, the Star Wars movies, the Indiana Jones movies, Ghostbusters, they all could have been, Back to the Future, they could have been based on a comic, but they weren't.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you went to work for the Donner Company. Richard Donner, obviously a great director, and Lauren Schuler Donner, wonderful producer. Did you want to go in? Which direction did you want to go in when you went in there? With Richard, with what he was doing, or with her? Or were you immediately attracted to the producing side of things?
I think initially, certainly I was aware of Dick's credits that we've discussed. And initially, I would have thought, yes, I want to go and follow in Dick's shoes. When I started working there, I interned there for 1.5 years. I was a receptionist there one summer, and then I was a paid PA there my last semester in school. And having spent so much time, I got to see sort of who did what and what was going on. And it was actually Lauren who was working more, who was doing more interesting projects, who was involved in more things. And it was her staff and her assistants that kept moving up the ladder. And when I was an intern there, she had an assistant who was doing quite well and was about to get promoted up to work on a movie called Free Willy 2. And he couldn't go there without replacing himself as assistant, which is how I then got hired as her assistant. And his name was Scott Stuber, and he now runs film for Netflix.
Yeah, and previously
ran Universal. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Lauren has an amazing track record.
Not
of
a bad
nurturing.
training ground. Would you recommend
Incredible.
that to become a producer, to start in that kind of level, to see all aspects of everything?
Absolutely, and even now with the 10 years of Marvel Studios, we have promoted the executive producer of there is another producer on Ant-Man and the Wasp, Stephen Broussard, the executive producer who's working on Captain Marvel right now, Jonathan Schwartz. These were my assistants 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. So we promote from within.
And he'll be taking applications after the, no. So Lauren produced X-Men, and you had your first producing credit, I think associate producer on that. Is that how you met, Avi?
Yes.
In terms of Marvel, is that how that relationship started?
Absolutely. Yeah, I worked on the first X-Men film, which had it sort of geared up and then went down and then ramped up again and then went down over the course of 3 or 4 years. Had been in development, I don't know, 5 or 6 years before that. Yeah. And finally, it started to come together. And there I met Avi Arad. Avi Arad, who at the time ran Marvel Films, would commute from New York to LA a few times a week, and really had this belief that that these characters could do well cinematically, and he was right. And we worked together. He then, after we worked together on X-Men, he hired me at Marvel Studios, which at the time were about 3 offices sharing space on Little Santa Monica with a kite company that Marvel owned. There were not grand expectations for Marvel Studios from the comics division, because there hadn't been a lot of luck with features, particularly from Marvel, in the decades before that. Right. There had been films that were the opposite of luck before that, that hadn't done anything for the brand, so they were very skeptical of it. X-Men, soon followed by Spider-Man, started to change that.